Good morning, loves. Another chapter of Bruce Coville's Goblins in the Castle, Chapter 5. The North Tower. Do you know what it feels like when you realize you've done something truly stupid? Then you know how I feel about 5 seconds after Igor entered the room. It was impossible for me to get out of the room without his noticing me. If I just stood there, he might have been angry, but at least I wouldn't have looked as if I had something to hide, as if I had been caught snooping. Suddenly, I had an idea. Waiting until Igor turned away from me, I jumped out from the rags and screamed, "Boo!" at the top of my lungs. "Aye!" cried Igor, spinning around. He hit me over the head with the bear. Though the bear was soft, the force of the blow knocked me over. "William!" cried Igor when he saw that it was me. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you," I said, pushing myself to a sitting position. "Because you scared me," because you scared me, I said, not bothering to add that I had also wanted to draw his attention away from the fact that I was hiding in his bed. Igor looked puzzled. Then he looked mad, which was pretty frightening. Then he began to laugh. "Good joke on Igor. Igor scare boy. Boy scare Igor. Brave boy to scare Igor." The way he said brave made me wonder what he would have done if he hadn't liked the joke. "Listen, Igor, I have a message for you. Someone named Ishmael." "Don't call him that." I paused, then started again. "A strange person asked me to tell you. The most dangerous night is almost here." Igor furrowed his brow. "Sound important. What does it mean?" Igor not know. Igor should know. But Igor forget. Sometimes things get foggy in Igor's head. "Like the North Tower," I said. Igor looked at me with fear in his eyes. "What about North Tower?" he asked nervously. "Well, it has fog around it all the time, and I can't figure out what's inside it. So it's a lot like your head," I added, amused at my own cleverness. "North Tower," muttered Igor, ignoring my joke. Igor don't like North Tower. "Why not?" I asked, serious now. He was silent for so long I began to wonder whether he had heard me. When I looked at him, I saw that his eyes had gone funny and far away looking, almost as if he were in a trance. I reached out and shook his arm. "Igor, are you all right?" He blinked. "William, don't you know when someone's thinking?" Now you make Igor forget. He made one of his humpy shrugs. "Something important up there," he said. "Something very important. And very not good." Igor remembered that now. Igor remembered that very most long time ago. That tower got locked, so it would stay locked forever. Something fierce and bad up there. But Igor don't know what it is. Igor can't remember. He sounded as if he was starting to get angry, so I changed the subject. But his reaction made me more curious than ever about what was in that tower, which reminded me of my original reason for coming to visit him. What about the noises? I asked. Do you know what causes them? What noises? The noises I hear at night. They're like moans mostly, as if someone is very, very sad. Or a lot of someone's, but I can never find them. Could be ghosts, said Igor, giving his bear a little squeeze. Did you ever see a ghost? I asked. Don't think so. Hard to tell down here. Sometimes the noises keep me from going to sleep, I said. That's why I came here to see you tonight. The noises were keeping me awake, and I wanted to ask you about them. As I spoke, I found myself stifling a yawn. Igor looked at me for a moment. Here, he said at last. Hold Bear. Bear good for sleeping. I woke in my own bed. I was confused at first how I'd gotten there. Then I began to have foggy memories of Igor guiding me up the long stairway from the dungeons. I'd been stumbling with exhaustion. Finally, Igor had just picked me up. Cradled in his arms, I'd collapsed into a deep sleep. I was wondering how Igor had known where to bring me when I was distracted by something moving under the covers. It was Mervyn. He climbed onto my window and stared at me, his whiskers twitching expectantly. If you want breakfast, you'll have to wait until I get some myself, I said, tapping him on the head with my finger. Climbing out of bed, I shook myself out of my clothes, which were fairly filthy after past night's adventures. Later, I would take them down to the room where Hulda kept the wash tubs. She didn't do laundry very often, once every several weeks at most. But I had plenty of clothes, and if I ran out, I could always find more in one of the abandoned rooms. You look tired this morning, shouted Hulda, when I stumbled into the kitchen 15 minutes later. I didn't sleep well last night, I said, as she scooped up a bowl of porridge and handed it to me. I took my usual place at the big table in the center of the kitchen and sliced a thick slab from the loaf of dark bread Hulda placed in front of me. Though it had been years since I had raised the topic of the North Tower with anyone upstairs, Igor's strange reaction to my mention of the previous night had made me curious. I decided to try asking Hulda about it. Land's sake, William, she bellowed, wiping her plump hands on her apron and brushing back a wisp of gray hair. What do you want to ask a question like that for? Anything in this castle that's locked is probably locked for a reason. My guess is that tower went so long without anyone cleaning it that the Baron decided it was easier to lock the door and forget it than take care of the mess. After all, the last housekeeper didn't take care of this place the way I do. I resisted an urge to snort. I'd been writing my name in the dust in various places around the castle since Carl had first taught me over 6 years earlier. As far as I knew, the only signatures that no longer existed were the ones that had been covered by new dust. Fortunately, Hulda's cooking was better than her cleaning. Slicing another piece of bread, I ate half and tucked the other half in my shirt to share with Mervyn later. On impulse, I cut another slab and slipped that into my shirt as well. Maybe Igor would like it. After I'd taken Mervyn his breakfast, I climbed to the South Tower. I studied the countryside for a moment. It was brilliant with late October foliage. Next, I turned my gaze on the North Tower. As always, it was swathed in a thick mist. What was in there? I decided to ask Carl. The library was pleasantly warm that morning, with the big fires burning in the huge stone fireplaces at either end. Weak autumn sunlight streamed through the windows, making puddles of light on the old carpet. The Baron sat at his desk studying a huge book with yellowed pages. "Morning, Jasper," he muttered as I walked past. "Good morning, sir," I said, annoyed as usual he had forgotten my name. Carl sat at the far end of the library, repairing the binding of an old book. "How are you today, William?" he asked when I walked up. "Just fine," I replied. I watched him for a moment, admiring the way his long fingers could work the glue and the leather to make the repair mark almost invisible. When he was finished, I said, "Carl, why is the north tower locked?" His finger slipped, making a botch of the careful work he had just done. He didn't seem to notice. "Why do you want to know?" His voice was low, almost a hiss. "Well, it's the only place in the castle I can't go. There must be some reason." "I'm sure there is," said Carl, his voice even lower than before. "But I don't know what it is, and I wouldn't ask him if I were you," he added, gesturing toward the Baron with a nod of his head. "I asked once, and it almost cost me my job. It's something we don't talk about. I'll say this, though. Anything in this castle that's locked probably has a good reason to be. So I wouldn't go messing with it if I were you." "But that's all I have to say about it," snapped Carl. I turned away and walked away puzzled and angry. I decided it was time to go see Igor. The trip was easier now that I had made it a couple times, and it seemed to take less time to reach his cell. "William," he cried joyfully when he saw me at the door. "Glad you're here." "I brought something for you," I said, reaching into my shirt and taking out a slab of bread I had saved for him. Igor's eyes lit up. "Food!" he cried, reaching for it, snatching the bread from my fingers. He turned and began to stuff it into his face. "I'm glad you like it," I said, surprised and amused by his reaction, feeling a sudden fondness for Igor, who might have been older than anyone else in the castle, but was at least willing to talk to me. I patted him on the back. "Don't do that," he screamed, spinning around and staring at me with a look of anger so intense it made me fear for my life. His fists were clenched and he was trembling with rage. I shrank against the wall, well aware that he could tear me limb from limb if he wanted. He started towards me.